Is Hamas's endangering their citizens technically a war crime?
Well, yes. Hamas is a really a unprecedented case study of in the commission of war crimes. I've written elsewhere that Hamas has committed 6 war crimes, and some of those war crimes, if not most of those war crimes, were before the recent Israel-Hamas war. That's why I found it intriguing that on December 27th, CNN would announce this is the first day of the war, when the war crimes that I'm going to cite for you now were all being committed, for years now. The first is Hamas has been deliberately targeting Israeli civilians by firing rockets and missiles and mortars, such that since the year 2000, Israel has, and particularly southern Israel, has been the target of close to 10,000 missiles, rockets, and mortars. So, war crime number 1, the deliberate targeting of civilians, which is prohibited, under international law, Geneva Convention and the like. The second thing is, while Hamas has been doing that, they have embedded themselves in this civilian infrastructure, and they have embedded themselves amongst civilians. In effect, they have been using the civilian infrastructure, and particularly civilians, as human shields, and that is a prohibited war crime under international law. You're not allowed to seek to immunize yourself from the response to your war crime, and when Israel acts in self-defense, by embedding yourself in the civilian infrastructure and using civilians as human shields. The third war crime is that Hamas has been engaged in widespread and systematic assaults on the Israeli citizenry. Not only the bombardments of the last 9 years, but also the suicide terror bombings that we should not forget, cost the lives of hundreds of Israelis and thousands wounded. Well, this all amounts to what's called widespread and systematic attacks on civilians, and those constitute not only war crimes, but crimes against humanity. So that's a third. The fourth thing is that the Hamas charter speaks expressly about incitement to genocide. So you have a charter that is genocidal in its objective, anti-Semitic in its ideology, using terrorism as its instrumentality, and global in its reach. That too is a war crime. That's the fourth war crime. The fifth war crime is what's called the violation of the perfidy principle. You're not allowed to misappropriate and misrepresent international humanitarian signals and facilities for the purposes of committing a terrorist act. For example, you cannot use an ambulance with a Red Cross insignia for the transportation of terrorists or weapons. You cannot use a United Nations facility for the purposes of being a weapons storehouse or launching a weapon. All these things, you cannot use a hospital where Hamas had embedded itself for purposes of storaging weapons or launching weapons from it. All these constitute the breaches of the perfidy principle, and that is the fifth war crime. The last war crime comes out of the International Convention on the Rights of the Child and the optional protocol regarding protection of the rights of children in armed conflict. You are not allowed to recruit and train and dispatch children as suicide bombers. Well, Hamas has been doing this now for years. That is a sixth war crime. It is a violation of the rights of the most vulnerable of the vulnerable, namely their own Palestinian children. If you take all these 6 war crimes together, there's almost no other case study that aggregates together so many war crimes by one terrorist entity as has been committed by Hamas. This is a textbook dimension of war crime.
And what venue hears cases of these violations?
Well, the irony is that it is Israel that is being sought after for purposes of holding Israel to account for war crimes, because what you've got as part of what I call the delegitimization of Israel under the cover of law, you have putative attempts to actually try Israelis for war crimes, but Hamas, which is the perpetrator of these war crimes, to which Israel has been responding in self-defense, they have not been held accountable, and they in fact should be. They have been received in capitals of the world when they should have been behind the docket as accused war crimes and as accused criminals.
But what venue can they be tried for these war crimes?
Well, any country, well, not any country, I should say, countries that have universal jurisdiction principle in their legislation can try anyone for crimes committed outside their jurisdiction if that person lands in their territory. Well, there are countries where Hamas leaders have visited who have that type of legislation that could try Hamas leaders, and rather than try them, they receive them. That's the kind of thing that is simply unacceptable. Some of those Hamas leaders also have a nationality which permits them to be tried under the principles of the International Criminal Court, because the International Criminal Court can only try nationals of state parties to the International Criminal Court treaty. Now, most of the Arab countries, all of the Arab countries almost, are not state parties, but one of them is, and that's Jordan, and some of these Hamas people have Jordanian citizenship. They're not living in Jordan today. They're heads of Hamas, but they could be tried.
Would the government of Jordan have to be the one to bring the charges?
No.
Or
No. The charge can be, anybody could refer that to the International Criminal Court and ask the court to, the special prosecutor, to institute proceedings.
shouldn't Israel be the one to instigate it?
Again, it's something that I would have thought that Israel, might have done that, but I suspect what Israel has been worried about is that they're going to encourage trials of Israelis. But what these intentions have already been made felt. I mean, there's been an attempt to try Israelis in Spain. There's been an attempt to try them in the UK. There's been an attempt to try them in Belgium. There's an attempt to institute proceedings before the International Criminal Court. The notion by Israel that we should not do this because it's going to be done to us has actually been turned on its head. It's being done to Israel, and Israel is yet to go ahead and bring these proceedings themselves.
Would you encourage Israeli lawmakers? Are they lawmakers or?
I can only encourage my government, but since these are universal crimes and crimes against humanity, yes, I would encourage Israelis to do this, or to encourage others to do this.